So I'm going to review my 8026 excavator. This is actually my own personal machine, and I've had this for nearly 5.5, nearly 6 years now. So I've had it a while, and I can really talk you through what I see, the good bits of this machine, and some of the bits I'd love to see JCB improve in the future. I know they're pretty good at listening to operator feedback, so let's hope one day maybe they might listen to a couple of things I've got to say about this. I'll talk you through how it's been reliably, how it drives, and the costs and what I see versus the leading sort of brands in this sector. Really are Kubota, they do make a very good mini digger, very strong residual values. We've looked at the Hitachi. I don't personally rate that at this size. They do some other good machines. The Volvo's not a bad machine either to compare this against, which of course I had the opportunity to do a few months ago. So you'll have to excuse the dust and dirt on this particular job. It's been really dusty. I've been working on this mugger, as they call it, multi-use games area, and the initial dig out was just all turned to dust really, because it's obviously been so hot recently. But anyway, polishers, hashtag polishers aside, the access I think for the 8026 is pretty good. It's based on the 8025 and of course the very early sort of 803 model really, which was renownedly a good machine back in the day. And I really think the 8026, they've sort of struck that balance between where the 8025 is let down a little bit performance, and where the 803 is that little bit too heavy to tow around realistically. So they've done a good compromise here. Essentially it runs the same 1.5 litre Perkins engine that I think it always has done, even from the 803. It's pretty good on fuel. The tank takes about 40 litres, just under 40 litres really, when you're filling it up from sort of, it beeping at you. And it'll run for a good sort of 2 days on that in normal use. If you're using it really hard, then it'll do about 25 litres, 30 litres a day. That seems to be, you run it sort of 10 hours flat out. I mean, maybe you're thinking I'm crazy working that long, but yeah, that's the reality. But I don't think that's too bad really for a machine this size, and it certainly packs some punch. Not bad access. You can get to the fan belt. The air filter you get to the other side. Oil filter's down there, which is tight but not impossible. You have actually got some room down there. Obviously there's a dipstick here. You fill up your rad from there, but there's a bottle on the side, which I'll show you in a sec, which is where you check the level. Nice and easy to see any crap in your fuel, and a nice easy filter. They also run though a filter here, and a lot of people don't change that one. That's the little secret filter. Sorry, it's not here, it's here. That's the bastard. Down there, you don't change that one. They are quite common for breaking down, for people not changing that, like £3 filter. So yeah, worth doing, as they say. The engine cover and stuff is plastic, which is there, I guess, to save weight, but it doesn't rattle at all. It's quite well dampened. Obviously has the strut to hold it up. So yeah, I don't really think the quality of that's too bad. Certainly a lot better made than that Volvo one was, for example, which was quite flimsily made in my opinion. Fueling is nice and easy. You can get a jerry can to it. Trust me, I do regularly. I also spill it around the place, you can see, but it's really easy to get to your fuel. Around the side here is all your hydraulics, which makes it nice and easy to sort of work out what hose, if you need to change one. They're all banded up, something that JCB do, which I think is a good idea really, and that links in with obviously the other end on the machine. They've got all their own little tags, so quite a useful feature that. Hydraulic tanks here, nice and easy to check your level, and this is where you'd check your radiator level and stuff. Air filter's nice and easy. One thing these do suffer from a bit is, and I've had it on mine, I had it last year, the rads get blocked up. It's actually quite difficult to get right down, not so much for the hydraulic one on the front here, but the actual engine radiator. You can't really get in here, you can't do any of this. It'd be nice to see some kind of quick release or something for me. I know it's quite tight down there, it's even nicked out in the counterweight, but to get to that properly I had to take the counterweight off, which sounds horrific but actually wasn't too bad a job really. It's held on with like 4 bolts, really easy to get to. forklift in the back and she came off nicely. But for me, that's not an uncommon problem with these machines. They work in the dirt, the dust, and you just get crap in the rad, and they overheat, and obviously that's not ideal for the machine. Everything else in here, this one has two-way hydraulics, aux hydraulics, which you can easily change on this little lever here. That's what that is. A lot of the parts, you know, they use decent quality parts. That says made in Germany on it. I'm sure some of it probably says made in China somewhere, but you know, I haven't found this machine to be substandard in quality. A general issue I've had on it is paint, and you can see it sort of flakes off there. I don't want to go pulling all the paint off my machine, but it's done it on the cab as well. And I've touched this machine up probably once a year, I guess. I have to do it just to keep it how I'd like it. I guess if you ran one in a hire fleet, maybe you wouldn't care. But for me, it's where I like to keep my machine nice and tidy. Obviously the plastics all survive quite well, but and this is obviously damage from me. I do occasionally, I think we all do make mistakes, and this little thing works in tight spots. So you know, on a big muck heap, I don't think you've got an excuse to rub your ass, but when you're right up against a house and a fence post, it happens, you know, stuff happens. But I get it painted and it doesn't really bother me too much. It got decent track frame on this. I think it's really well built, but like that Volvo, really, it's all quite beefy, and I think a lot of this is shared off of the 803, really, that it sort of came off. It's got nice sloping sides, so you know, like a bigger machine, really, it does help to keep the crap out of there. I've recently replaced the tracks. I think the originals did 2200 hours, something like that, and I've put Camso tracks on it, mainly because JCB quoted me a stupidly long lead time to replace the Bridgestones that it came with. I have to rate these Camsos, actually. They've been all right. Came from Digbits. They were in stock. Came sort of next day. Bit of a bastard to fit, as they always are, and you're on your own. But yeah, I'll do a video on them actually when I've used them a bit more and really got a feel. But so far, impressions are good on those. It has actually had, I'm thinking of tracks, it had one roller. I think that's the original one. The other side I put a new roller on. But again, after nearly 2,500 hours, I didn't think that was bad particularly. Everything else on that's all original. It does do a lot of tracking about, and I do abuse it in that way. It tracks around with ton bags, and you know, it does get a bit of abuse, bless it. Not abuse, but heavy use, really. I probably should run a 5-ton machine, you know, doing a big area like this. This is 5-ton territory all day long, but you own it, and you bring what you've brought. So, you know, this is what we use, and the ability to tow it and stuff is a real benefit for me. But anyway, I think this machine's probably got one of the best digging geometries of any of these 2.7-ton machines. That arm is massive. I know we compared it against the Volvo, and the Volvo had a lot of reach as well, and it does, but do you remember how far forward that king post was when you compare? I'll probably snip a picture in the edit. This is much more centered. You look with the end of the sleeve center, or the ring is here. You know, you've got all this counterweight over the back here, and there's your digging, whereas the Volvo was kind of all much further forward, and that's how it gained its reach. For me, it makes this thing really, really stable, and that is something that I really rate about it. Is, you know, that's why it performs, I think, very well. Is it will pick a tiny bag up and it'll throw it to 3/4 of its reach out, because the weight is right on this. And it looks right as well. You know, the blade isn't particularly long, but it's nicely proportioned. I just find it works very well with that. The other thing I'd say on the counterweight, we're getting some rumbles of thunder now, is that it's not like a dead square. They've rounded these corners, which I think really help to make it better for tight access. You know, you can offset the arm 45 degrees each way, which I'd like it to go a bit more, to be honest, especially over to the left, but it's what it is, and I guess it all depends on where they can fit the ram and how long it can be, etc. So there's all kinds of things that compromise that, but it hasn't got the best offset, and when you're in a tight space, you know, having this little bit here, you know, it's almost zero radius until it starts getting around to about here somewhere, and then it just creeps out. So for me, that's been really handy. You know, a good compromise, I think, between having a back end on it and you know, accessibility, really, you know, for driving it in tight spaces. Other bits to note are the battery box, nicely done here, I think. When the door's closed, obviously it stops you being able to get in it. I mean, every person has a JCB key, I guess, if they really wanted to nick your battery. But I think it's a nice little touch there. It's got other kind of key features to mention on it, really, is the digging end. Come around this end. The rams are all a decent size. It runs 35mm pins and bushes. It's all original bushes on this, and it's pretty tight, to be honest. I've got a little bit of play in this little bit in the dog bone, but you're going to get that. I do grease it, you know, regularly, so that does help. But she's lasted. It's lasted really well, I think, for that kind of hours. I've certainly driven machines with a quarter of those hours on. They've been a lot worse. What I like this end is the bigger return on the hydraulics here. So if you compare to this side, you've got a much narrower gauge fitting. It's probably 1/2 inch and 3/4 or whatever they are, but this return side is much bigger. And I don't have a flail, but I'm told from in fact other subscribers on YouTube have got this machine, that it runs one really well, mainly I guess helped by the fact that that larger return will help it drain back to the tank better. Obviously it runs the tilt rotator, no problem. It's not particularly flow hungry. That flails are really where you test these. And this machine does have a bigger output as well. I think it does 65 litres a minute on the auxiliary, which the others are all about 55. So it, you know, it's a big percentage increase, really. And that's why I find with this machine, it punches way above its weight generally. Digging power, it's one of the most powerful ones if you look at the specs. And I'd agree with that. It's got some power. She'll dig to 3 metres. It'll lift a ton bag and throw it 3/4 of the way out before it falls over. In fact, I'd say, actually, if you were a technical man and you knew how to override the hydraulics, it would probably throw a ton bag right out to its full reach. What gives up is this ram lets by, or I imagine the valve does. It's got a safety feature that'll stop you pushing it too hard, I guess, because it doesn't seem short on power really for any of the tasks that I've done. It's been very good. Same cab as the 8025, the 8030, and I think the 8035 as well. They changed them around a little bit, but essentially it's an older style cab now. Let's face it, this is the few things that could be improved on this. The cab is one of them, and I think the modern JCB stuff is improving. This machine was designed or released back in 2012, something like that. This is a 2014 version, so I mean they'll probably say, oh, we've sorted the paint out now and bits, but this is where mine's at, 5 years in. So I say it how it is and how I found it. Anyway, the cab, it's not a bad cab by any means, and there are worse ones out there. It's got a nice wide door opening, decent grab handles to get in. The windscreen lifts up nicely into the top. The bottom one, you're meant to undo it on this, this system, pull it out and then stick it behind the seat, which it works, but it's not as nice as that Volvo where you can clip it into the upper window and fire it all above your head. That is a nice touch. Other things I'm not so sure on the cab. The wiper sits up here, which is absolutely fine, but what you do is if you go for the quick hitch button without looking and accidentally knock the wiper, what it does is it tries to fire in your face, because obviously as it comes off this, it's like sprung into the cab. So that's a bit of a shocker occasionally, and can catch you out. So it'd be nice to see the wiper go up with the windscreen as well for me. Again, from the floor, it's not a bad floor setup. It's got relatively usable track pedals as well, which obviously fold away if you don't like them, but I actually find you can use them. Where that Volvo gained is it didn't have this, so it felt like a much bigger cab, but actually when you got the tape measure out, it really was marginal. This obviously has the bolts that hold it, hold it down, and it's all kind of insulated to try and keep some of that that heat out or whatever when you're cold in the winter, keep your bum warm. But as a result, you haven't really got that far to put your feet for. They're resting on here, and it all just, for me, gets in the way a little bit. It's got a nice, it came with the quick hitch holder, which was nice enough. Obviously, I now run an Engcon bar, so it's different to the original one, but it still fits the hole. A little bit of storage for your grease gun, etc. Your heater controls are down here, and the heater is really effective in this. It certainly doesn't lack any heat, even in the winter. The only thing is, it blows at the back of your legs, which is a real shame. It'd be nice to see it vented round, and I think the 8030 and the 35, for some reason they've managed to probably find a bit more space to fit the washer bottle somewhere else, and there's a heater duct that comes out and runs up the side there, which I think is a bit of a nicer touch, really. Let's face it, you're going to use the heater because you need to demist the windscreen, and with it there, okay, keep the cab door shut and let it warm up. It actually does demist it pretty well, but when you're using it and it rains and you close the window because it's coming in at you, it steams up pretty quick, and the heater down there doesn't really help you too much. So that would be one thing I'd love to see. Another thing I'd love to see improved on this. And again, with a modern cab, I think you would probably sort that. Same with the cup holder, really. I came up with my own solution, stuck a cheap one off eBay and screwed it into that spare bolt hole. Again, modern cab, it comes with a cup holder. That's where the Kubota wins, really. It's got a better designed cab, but it's a much more modern designed machine that way. Yeah, so otherwise this pod folds right back. I think it's good. The pedal, a bit of a shame you can't delete the pedal option. It'd be nice to be able to get rid of that. That would again help with the foot space, get it on the rollers. My machine didn't come with that, so we have the pedal, and even though I've got DC2 system, the pedal still is what offsets my arm. So yeah, unfortunately not been able to lose that one, because that would help a lot with particularly your right foot. You kind of end up with it wedged between the washer bottle and this, and you end up with this area over here and stuff. It's a compromise, but not a bad cab. I spend plenty of time in it. Radio's tucked away over in the back corner, and the speakers are up there. That all works quite well. Yeah, it's not been too bad, having owned it 5 years. I'd say, as far as reliability goes, the first 500 hours of owning this machine, it did mess me around quite a bit. It came out the factory. It's a brand new machine. You can imagine you're pretty stoked. Your first brand new machine. This thing started my business, really, and it's been really good for it. But it comes out the factory, and the seat belt had been bolted through the right hand console. So this fixed console here, actually it was bolted, one of the bolts back down there, the seat belt was bolted through it, and I thought, how have you done this? How has this passed the inspection method? It's been at the factory, it happened, someone bolted it down, mistake. It's then gone to the quality control at the factory, it's missed. A major safety item has been missed. It's then gone on to the dealer has then missed it, and again, another major safety thing. It's got to be on a tick box, surely, for, check the machine has a beacon, tracks on it maybe, and the seatbelt works. I mean, that would be kind of some key points. It got missed, it got delivered to me, and in fairness to JCB, they have always fixed this stuff, but this isn't the point. This is why the other brands are doing very well. They don't come out with these inherent problems, and that was one. I mean, I spotted it as soon as I took delivery of it. I was like, what the hell is this? And next day they came out and sorted it, but it shouldn't have been delivered like that, should it? That's the point. Now, I questioned JCB about this on a day I got sent up with, very lucky actually to be invited in the factory, and got invited to have a look around the compact products line when they'd released their new 19C. An absolutely brilliant day. Anyway, got the opportunity to question them on it, and there's the guys doing the quality checks, and the director of compact products stood there, and we had it. We had a conversation about it, and they insist that they have improved their quality measures in the last 3 years, really, and they've recognised that they have had problems. Yes, JCB are actually saying now that any issue that gets logged by a customer or causes a machine to have a warranty claim, they'll actually know who fitted that item at the time and be able to go back in the factory and go, right, Dave, what's this? Is this Friday afternoon, or is it an inherent problem that he's having? Maybe he's struggling with materials that he's using, or the technique that they're using to build these things. Obviously, it's a line, and they don't build just 8026s either. They build these on the same line as they build a lot of their other compact products. So you're not just doing one job. They do mix it about a bit, and maybe there are some build issues, with how the buildability of the machine. Anyway, it's all very clever, and when you go up there, it's brilliant. You get a real yellow injection, but don't forget, having bought one, mine has had some issues. So I had the seatbelt thing on day one, real shame. It then was absolutely fine for probably 2-3 months, and then it started to have this weird earth problem where it would you turn the lights on, the radio would go off, or something stupid like that, or use the wiper and the beacon would stop working, and weird things. And I thought, it's got a bit of a thing. And you're flat out working, and it was early days of my business, it was really busy, and you think, well, I don't have time to until it goes really wrong. You can't really diagnose these things, can you? So I thought, I'll work with it. And it got to a point where you couldn't actually turn the machine off anymore. You could actually take the key out of it, and it was still running. And I thought, right, we definitely have a problem here. Managed to flick about with the switches, and the beacon, turn the beacon on, that would turn the machine off. I thought, okay, well, that works, whatever. But anyway, JCB came out, because I then actually had a diagnosable fault that I could go, right, this is a problem, and took the floor up. And sure enough, an earth had been fitted, poorly fitted earth, all cross-threaded. The bolt was cross-threaded, the main earth to the cab, and or to the whole machine rather. Actually, it was the one underneath the floor. It just poorly fitted. So the poor thing was backfeeding through itself, and that's why when you turn the lights on, or you put the beacon on, the lights would dim, or the radio would whatever. It was doing all kinds of weird things. Anyway, in the process of checking that out, they also then discovered that the pin that locks your orbiter, the hydraulic gyro, for want of a better word, that allows the turret to spin round, because we all know you can only spin 6 times one way. You have to be very careful of that, otherwise they unscrew. That had snapped off, and so it wasn't locating in the top of the turret, the actual cab of the machine. And that meant every time I slewed, the hoses were basically being yanked round, and that was causing them rubbing. So they actually took the machine back to the workshop and said, it's going to be quite a major sort of job to do, we want to do it in the workshop. And so my machine was officially down. Now, this is the point where JCB go, we've got all this uptime. Well, what it takes to be down is not the seatbelt being bolted through, it's not the fact that you can't turn it off. What it takes for it to be down is it has a major fault like that, really. And in my case, the orbiter was effectively broken, although it was still working fine, but it wouldn't have done it any good long term. So it was the right choice by the dealer to take it back. So they took it back in, take about a week to fix. In the meantime, of course, you're machineless, so you go, right, well, I'm busy, what do I do? You can hire a machine, we'll pay you. Excellent, good call. You hire a machine, one caveat, it's got to be a JCB. Right, okay, so who hires a JCB around here? Not many people. Most people tend to run Kubotas, certainly the people I've got accounts with. So I had to do a little bit of fudging some paperwork with yes, I've rented JCB off them, although it may have been a Kubota. Anyway, so small little things like that were a bit annoying. You'd have thought JCB could have just waived the whatever, the higher charge of what it is, any machine to do. But just something to note, and I don't know if other dealers would be like that, but it's something worth noting. Anyway, came back 5 days later, I think. Actually, I went and picked it up, and they had cleaned it, which was actually a really good job, because it was pretty minging when it went in. It had a nice hot wash. They'd sorted that. They'd solved a couple of other problems as well, and that was about 500 hours. I think I had it serviced at the same time. So she'd done her first 500 hours and messed about a bit. It then ran faultlessly for the next 500 hours. And then I started realising I had a bit of an oil leak, probably about maybe nearly 900 hours on it, 1,000 hours, and it was getting to nearly 2 years old, and I thought, right, let's get JCB out, I want to solve this oil leak. You'd see it on the blade, you'd get a couple of drips on the blade, and a bit weird. And I thought, okay, you know, where's it coming from? Looked in the engine and there was oil all over the place. I thought, oh, it must be rocker gasket or something simple, but you know, it's leaking down the side and blowing. Anyway, it wasn't that. What it was the sump was incredibly loose, and I mean like finger tight loose. How the sump hadn't fallen off or vibrated off, I have no idea. That would have been pretty catastrophic for the engine, because obviously it would have lost oil pressure very quickly. Yeah, the sump was loose, and therefore it was just leaking outside the gasket, and the fan was then obviously blowing it all over the engine, which was making it look like it was a real problem. Anyway, fairly simple to fix. Belly pan off, you know, tighten the sump up. But again, you think, oh, come on, that's come from Perkins. That's not even JCB's fault. They've sent it, you know, it can't have been torqued up or whatever. Because I've tightened it up since to obviously, you know, 5 Gadugadugs on the old gun, and it hasn't come undone since. So if they'd have done that at the factory at Perkins, you know, bit of a shame to have had. It wasn't downtime, but these machines don't. You know, I'm not just on a site. A little drip won't do me. I work in people's driveways. I work, you know, on finished ground, and you can't have oil leaking out of your fairly new machine when it was then, you know, a year old or whatever. But anyway, it got resolved. JCB came out, they resolved it. Again, within a day, I've always had a fitter. They've been very good for that. And, you know, the backup has been, you know, well, you'd hope to never use it. Unfortunately, I have a few times, as I'm saying, but they've been pretty good. The last thing it did, and this is probably going to be fatal now, isn't it? Because obviously it's going to break down on me in a minute, having said this. The last real problem I had was just out of warranty. Actually, I think I got 3 years. May have got 3 years warranty with it, which I thought was very good at the time. 3 years warranty, and the last thing, just outside of warranty, I mean like 2 months, maybe less, maybe a month, outside of warranty, I got a problem where it would just cut out all of a sudden, almost like you've lifted the lever up, the pod, just cut out. You thought, oh, okay, it's a bit weird. Turn it off, turn it on again, it'd start working. You thought, okay, right. And as usual, you're busy, you're trying to work, you're thinking, oh, come on, you'll last the job and we'll get away with it. And it got worse, it got worse, it got worse, and then it totally died. And I literally had a machine stuck in a job, like, just wouldn't move. Couldn't do anything, messed about. I thought it was the sensor down on the arm thing. I tried this. Anyway, essentially the solenoid had broken that that keeps it, you know, livens it up. Essentially, what this little sensor talks to is a solenoid down there that gives it hydraulic flow and says, yeah, you can drive me. And as far as it was concerned, I wasn't safe, therefore it wouldn't let me drive. And the reason it just gave up. Solenoid just died on me. 1,000 odd hours in, 1,200 hours maybe, but outside of my 3 years, maybe it was 1,400. It wasn't, certainly hadn't done 1,500 hours by then. Anyway, that was 600-700 quid to fix by the time you'd had a fitter out to obviously try and diagnose it, because I didn't know what it could be at the time. The solenoid that we're talking about is the one that you need to liven up if you ever want to try and jump a digger to steal it or get it moving because you don't have the key, for example. So it was obviously then protected by lots of metal work, extra sort of welded bits they put on to try and stop you gaining access to it so easily. So pretty tricky, that one, to get to. Took him a few hours, and I was obviously miles away from where the depot was, to pay travelling time. All adds up. Anyway, it was a pretty nasty bill in the end, of about 600-700 quid, which could have done without. Having said that, for the last 1,000 and a bit hours, it's been absolutely fine. And I mean, this last week, when I started this job, it did its first hose at just over 2,500 hours. The hose to the boom went, which is understandable. They bend thousands of times, however many times, you know, you think they're bending constantly, and it let go of hose, which, to be honest, I'm not sad about. It's what happens when you run older kit, and this is getting on a bit now at over 5 years old and 2,500 hours. Tracks go, it's what it is, and they can go. Some people make them last forever, depending on the type of work you're doing. I do use this digger pretty hard, so to have tracks last 2,500 hours, I think it's pretty reasonable for me, to be honest. I'm happy enough with that. They weren't that expensive. I think it cost me like 500-ish quid for a set. It wasn't crazy money. Don't quote me, I can't remember exactly. But anyway, there's a few things that the reason I really need to talk about the reason I picked this machine, and there was a few offerings about, obviously. it was a tie-up between this and the Kubota. The Kubota was about £3 more expensive than this JCB. They didn't have availability at the time. JCB did. The dealer is very local to me at Green Shields in Farnham, and I mean, I haven't had bad service out of them. The guy who actually sold me the machine, you know, he still works there, and we still talk occasionally, which is pretty good. I bought, you know, one machine out of there. You know, they make their money selling to A-Plant and other big companies, really. You know, one guy buying one machine every 5 years, 6 years is not exactly their biggest customer in the world, is it? But every customer is important, and the backup is what sells you the next machine. So, haven't really got any complaints particularly about the dealer. They were very accommodating when I was looking at whether I got this machine or whether I got basically a newer 801 that I owned at the time to start my business with. And you know, I had a couple of meetings with them about costs, and they let me, you know, sort of test drive a couple, which was really good to go through that with someone who at the time they could have thought, oh, this guy ain't got any money, you know, whatever, he's just messing us around. But no, I did have money, and I did actually buy machines, and that was all helped by the fact that they were quite accommodating to my questions and various bits. I paid 22.5 grand for this, I think, back in 2000, literally January 2015. I actually took delivery, but I did the deal late 2014, and I don't think that's bad, really. They are now around the 25 mark, as I understand it, to buy. List price is about 28, but you paid about 25 for one now, so they've gone up 2.5 grand. I had 5 or 6 buckets. I did spec all the buckets with it, but otherwise it was essentially a factory stock item that they had. Came with a fixed seat, didn't have the suspension seat. I would get the suspension seat if I went again, and I have actually upgraded this seat. This is an upgraded seat which I put in it, which is nice, but it has its compromises, really. It's a little bit too tall, and for me, my head's quite close to the window, but it's fine for how I drive it. But the JCB factory suspension seat would be the way I'd go on the next one. So the thing about the 8026 and where its real benefits are is that it drives absolutely lovely. I mean, on this particular job, I'm doing quite a delicate process of trying to grade this gear to within 10mm, which, to be honest, is pretty hard work. I'll probably struggle doing it and actually talking to you, but it's a very delicate job, and I just find the hydraulics are lovely. It's fast when it wants to be. It moves. You can move the arm. You can track. You know, it's got power when you're digging, heavy digging. It doesn't ever seem to really lack power. I've said it before about kind of most hire companies would put out a 5-ton digger would actually probably be a 4.5-ton digger. You know, either a Kubota U45 or something. They call that a 5-tonner, and you know, there's a few hire companies kind of do that. That's what they call a sort of 5-ton digger. And I don't think this is very far off one at all. It probably does lack, you know, that real high-end sort of power that you'd get out of a 5-ton, but I think if you were in average sort of conditions, digging or loading, and you had the big bucket on this, the speed of this would really, it wouldn't outperform by any means, but I think you wouldn't be too far behind a 5-ton machine. That is, for me, in my experience anyway, that is how good this machine is when you really need to shift gear and you get it flat out. I actually rarely drive it flat out because it just doesn't really need it. It's been very, very good for me. Sort that out. So yeah, it very rarely gets driven. It gets driven, to be honest, you know, really flat out. Half revs at the moment, like it is, you know, or even 3/4. You know, it's got plenty of gear. I haven't run, as I say, I haven't run a flail on it, or a particularly heavy hydraulic attachment. But as I said before, it's got the best sort of hydraulic output of any of these 2.7-ton class diggers. so it's got no reason why you couldn't run a flail really competently, and I know a few of you out there do on one of these. Might be an attachment for me in the future, but just don't have enough paid work for one. You can in the farm, but if it's not paying, it's not earning its money, then there's no point in having it. But yeah, the driving experience of this, even before the Engcon was on it, was absolutely just for me. I haven't driven another machine that's like this smooth. It reminds me of the early Hitachis, or maybe the mid-2000s Hitachis. To be honest, everyone bangs on with the Hitachi and how smooth they are, and they do make a lovely, or they certainly did. I don't know about all their machines now. I haven't driven the bigger ones, the 13s, but mid-2000s, let's face it, those Hitachis of any size were just fantastic machines. And I think one of my favourite machines I've ever driven really was the ZX30. We had a 2006 one of those on a job that stayed with us for a couple of years. We put maybe 2,000 hours on it or more, and it was just a higher machine. We got it brand new. What a great digger. Again, a bit of a class up from this. I think the arm was that bit bigger, the cab certainly was bigger, but then the whole machine's bigger. You can't tow it. So this is, all of these 2.7 ton really ones are a compromise, and they all compromise in various different ways. JCB have gone for kind of out and out power, and if you need a machine to really perform because of the kind of work you do, this is the best one in the class, in my opinion. The disadvantages, of course, are, as I've said, towing of it. You can't have all the buckets with it. You certainly can't have any attachments. You'd be well over 3.5 ton, and that's the disadvantage of running a machine really. That's that kind of it's got that power and extra weight behind it. So yeah, I would buy another one. It certainly is be in my sort of top list. It's been excellent for me, and I talk about comparing against the Kubota. I think they've almost hit the compromises on the head. It's not as powerful as this, and I find the Kubota lacks, particularly in dipper force, compared to this, but the cab is nicer. The hydraulics are okay. I don't think they're as nice as this, but they're certainly perfectly acceptable. They don't have the jerkiness that the Volvo had, or definitely that Hitachi that I reviewed last year. That was Jerk City, which is a real shame compared to where, as I said, they used to be with the old ZX series machines. I thought they were really, really good. Yeah, compromises. You've got to pick which one you want. Do you want towability and be able to have a few buckets on there as well? In which case, the Kubota is, and then the Volvo, really for that matter, are probably more suited. If you need something that you need to perform, it needs to dig to 3 meters. You need to do, heavier lifting, moving tunny bags about and stuff. This will do it. The Kubota won't. I've bought them. I've used them. It just will not do what this does. But it's 400 kilos lighter, so, or nearly, 350 kilos lighter or something. So, compromises. That's how it is in life. JCB, I'd love you to update this machine. Pretty much touch nothing about what you've done with the hydraulics and the engine and stuff. That all works really well for me. What I'd love to see is, the modern, bit more of a modern cab. Option of aircon. Can I ask for aircon? Love aircon. That'd be lovely. Otherwise, it's a pretty good formula for me, and it certainly kind of suits the sort of work I do. So yeah, that's the 8026. I've owned it, as I say now, over 5 years, and that's where I see it. So there's something you need to be aware of with this 8026, and that is that the badge is it's not a 2.6 ton digger. This is one of the heavier, probably the heaviest 2.7, 2.8 ton machine you can tow. The badge says it's 2790. I'm pretty sure it weighs in over 2.8 ton. quite comfortably with some fuel in it and a bucket on the end, and that does make it very heavy to tow. You really have to be careful. You can't actually run any other buckets. The Engcon, strangely enough, doesn't weigh much more than the original hitch and bucket, so I've been quite lucky in that way. As I've said in my Engcon review, you know, they're a bit lighter than you think when you compare them against what your standard setups are and cast iron buckets that people put on these things these days. But this is no doubt a very heavy digger, and that I think is why it makes it very stable. It makes it very powerful. It outperforms no doubt the others, but you know, she's beefy. She is a 3-ton digger really, for all intents and purposes, and in America they call it an 8029, and to be honest, there's probably a better term for it. You know, the Kubota, the Volvo, they're coming in at 2.5 tons. This thing's 300 kilos heavier than that, and that's really what, you know, what gives it its beef. Having said that, you have to run a lightweight trailer. You can't then have your buckets. If you've got mud on the tracks, you'd potentially be overweight. I mean, we're talking kilos here as to whether this thing's over the 3.5 ton limit or not. I've put mine on the weighbridge. I know where it sits, but you've got to be careful every time you put that on the trailer, thinking, yeah, I have all of 3.5 ton up my back here. Whether I would get another 8026 is, as they are in this guise, it's been a bloody brilliant machine, but the point is that I think it could do with an upgrade, a bit of a refresh, and I'm kind of holding out really before changing this, see what JCB do, because they have been upgrading the range, and this is one of the last of the older 80 ranges that they've had for a long time now, which had a particularly bad name really, which is a shame, because this digger has been a really good machine for me. As I've said, it'd be nice if they, you know, what I'd like is if they could get a 57C and shrink it down so I can tow it. That would be lovely. Or maybe somehow it expands out and becomes a 57C once, you know, you've towed it there and it weighs 1.5 ton, but then somehow magically becomes 5 ton. I think everyone wants that. Not going to happen, is it really? But it'd be nice to have the more modern cab really. And a couple of little updated features. That's not to say this machine is bad, and in the second-hand market they're very good value for money. You pick one up for about 14-15 grand, again a couple of grand cheaper than the Kubota, and I guess really that is reflective of that initial price, isn't it? Because it was a couple of grand cheaper to buy when I bought new, and it's a couple of grand cheaper or worth a couple of grand less than the equivalent Kubota. So have I lost more? No, the relative thing has stayed the same. You know, parts aren't really that expensive for it. You know, the labour, it always adds up and things, but the parts themselves aren't too bad at all, and availability is very good. Dealers are good. You're never that far from a JCB dealer wherever you are. So I'm glad I went with a JCB. It's been a great machine for my business, and I think if it comes to renewal time, which maybe next year, we'll see how it goes. I'd like to get 3,500 hours out of this one really. I would look to definitely consider this would be in the running, especially if they update a few things on it. It'd be this, probably definitely the Kubota, whether the U30 or not, and the other one probably be, actually no, I don't think it would be the Volvo, because I'm not entirely sure on the Volvos for me. So probably between this and the Kubota. I think they're both machines at the top end of the market. This is definitely more powerful digging wise. It's got pretty better. I prefer the way it drives. The hydraulics are very smooth on this, as I've said before. But yeah, that for me would be the toss up between the two. This is heavier. It outperforms the Kubota, but as a result, it has compromises in towing and things, as I've said. So, it kind of, and having towed it around for 5 years, you do have to be careful, and that's something that I think, well, would I want to save a few 100 kilos? Kubota's nicer cab. I don't know. It's a mix. That's what the good fun is of owning this kit. But she'd be up there anyway. She makes the top 3. She probably makes the top 2. Because honestly, not been a bad machine. The 8025s, couldn't say. Haven't driven one. I know some people have and they don't like them, but this thing just drives very well. Uprated valve blocks. Don't know what they've done with it, but she's been good to me. Anyway, hope that answers some people's questions. A few of you have been asking me about sort of reviewing this machine for quite a while, and here it is. So that's my thoughts on it. Bit of a longer video because I have owned this machine, so I've got quite a lot of thoughts on it really, but it's yeah, so I certainly wouldn't avoid it, let's put it that way, whereas I would avoid that Hitachi. That was horrible. Anyway, I'll love the hate in the comments later. Right, cheers guys.